Hello, and welcome to Archive of My Own, a podcast dedicated to the greatest works of fan fiction that we all love. My name is Patrick, and let's be honest, I'm a fan fiction newbie. So each episode, we host guests with a particular love for a show, or movie, or book series, or even another podcast, to come tell me all about the fanfic that they love the most. Today on our episode, we'll be discussing the Magnus Archives, with special guest Dave L. to tell us about 3 of his favorite fics. Check it out, and as always, spoilers ahead. The Magnus Archives is a horror podcast, released from March 2016 to March of 2021, spanning 200 episodes over 5 seasons. The podcast follows a standard format across its 5 seasons, each episode containing a statement taken in the fictional Magnus Institute. This institute is dedicated to recording the stories and experiences of those who've had encounters with things that seem strange, off, that they couldn't understand. These statements are being recorded by the head archivist Jonathan Sims, coincidentally named after his voice actor, head writer, and creator of the show, Jonathan Sims. These recordings can only be preserved on audio cassette tape, which creates a lo-fi feel to the entire production. Since its conception, the podcast has had an extremely dedicated fan base. However, the show really only exploded in popularity in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, while the show was working through its penultimate season. During the pandemic, the podcast reached its 200th and final episode, wrapping up the plot in the world of the Magnus Archives. While the show is still technically continued in its sequel sister series, The Magnus Protocol, the popularity of the fandom still rages on in form of fan discussion, fan theories, and that's right, fan fiction. Joining me today is a very special guest, my good friend Dave. Today we'll be discussing 3 different fics from the Magnus Archives, the titles of which are Anchor by Driflew, The Cube Rule of Food Identification by Blue Jay Blue Skies, and finally, Beholding the GDPR, How the Magnus Institute Updated Its Privacy Policy for the 21st Century and Only Caused One Nervous Breakdown in the Process, by Shiny Opals. You'll be able to find them linked below, and make sure to check them out for yourself to make your own opinions. But as always, make sure to check the tags. Ready? Let's discuss. All right, Dave, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here for totally the first time ever.
Absolutely. I think in the spirit of all the best podcasts, this is being recorded for the second time because I destroyed the audio, which I think is pretty in character for a Magnus Archives podcast.
This has also happened to every other audio project we've ever worked on together, where the first one is lost.
That's not. Oh, yeah, that's true. I was about to say some of the Mountain Goats podcasts have been well preserved in the fact that nobody has listened to them.
Yeah, but no, we lost our first episode of that. Anyway.
So we're going to start off. We're starting off our discussion with Anchor by driflew.
Driflew.
Driflew. I hate that. I hate it actually.
Look, it's their name is Lou, and Drifloon or whatever is their favorite Pokemon. We know each other. We used to write fan fiction around. We used to write TMA fic around the same time and ran in the same circles. So which is why I, of course, had to give you my favorite of their work.
So this fic is particularly interesting because of the way it handles what the fic refers to as a popular fix-it trope. So a fix-it trope is in fan fiction when people will rewrite different plot lines or character developments to be either better or more like comforting to the reader. Could you expand on that a little bit and maybe how it kind of crops up in the Magnus Archives fandom?
So you tend to see fix in fandoms for work where sad stuff happens, you know? Especially with tragedies like TMA, the idea is that from the pitch, you know that the canon story is going to be about, you know, some bad stuff happening to these characters. And so it's kind of fun to pick them up like dolls and to kind of have a version where everything works out okay, you know?
But in this version, or in this fic, the version of the story does not really treat the characters as ending up okay, but rather a sort of commentary on one of those popular tropes of taking the character Sasha, who dies at the end of season one, and one of a popular fix-it trope is taking this character and then having her gain supernatural powers in a way where she can kind of keep the plot kind of nice and clean. But in this one, it's recharacterized as actually making things a whole lot worse.
Yeah, instead of what the show uses as kind of an allegory for at different times, like substance abuse and kind of darker urge like capitalism, all of these kind of like metaphors, instead of her gaining supernatural powers through that system of metaphor in the show, and it fixing everything, it actually, makes it everything again 100 times worse, like you said.
Earlier, we were talking about this, and you mentioned how fandom has kind of a problem with its characterization of female characters, and how they kind of tend to make them maybe a bit motherly. And while we don't have like an insane amount of time to go into that,
Mhm.
could you touch on maybe how Sasha is traditionally characterized in the sort of fic community for the Magnus Archives?
Yeah, it sucks. So Sasha dies in season one, and she has almost no screen time in season one. She is only in there for a very, very short amount of time. So we know very little about her as a character, and her general personality. And this kind of void the fandom tends to fill with the idea that if she had been there in the story, if she had taken the place of a male character, that she would have just been able, she would have been super confident, she would have been super smart, she wouldn't have made any of these wrong decisions, which one decreases the impact of the story as a tragedy because a lot of these things are unavoidable or set up by like structures outside of our character's control, and also takes away Sasha's actual character and the things that she struggled with, her impulsiveness, her flaws, with, and replacing it with this kind of perfect ideal. And it just means there's a lot of boring fic to read, honestly.
And so what we have here is an example of a fic that's not almost a fan fiction of fan fiction itself, where it is the tropes it's engaging with are meta not only to the media it's kind of spinning off of, but the culture around writing fic of that own fandom.
Absolutely. I gave you this one specifically because it is geared towards, like, it is aware of itself both as a piece of the Magnus Archives fan fiction and of fan fiction specifically. It's very, again, aware of its medium, aware of its genre, aware of these tropes, and interacting both with kind of the meta level of the show and the meta level of these fan discussions. And it bridges the gap really, really well. Like, we talk a lot about its technical aspects, but it's also just like a really good and suspenseful read that like really captures the characters and the tone of the show really well. Go check it out. It's a really good one. It's my favorite. I have to shill for Lou.
All right, next up, we're going to talk about the cube rule of food identification by Blue Jay Blue Skies. So this fic is
the exact opposite of Anchor, honestly, if you ask me. Like, we've talked about how Anchor is engaging with like fan tropes and like fix it things to say, no, if it was actually in the show, it would be much worse. It would have these actual things. We do these. This is the opposite. This is a fic that's not like, does not have the same meta level, tropey, like 1,000 words of just fun,
it reminded me of just a random like Tumblr post, and come to find out it is in fact inspired by a very specific Tumblr post where
one but two,
or not okay, but the Tumblr post is like a 2-panel cartoon, and this very much reads as a 2-panel cartoon.
that someone has stretched out to 1,000 words. It's that, and the two characters are having an argument, and then they end up kissing. The fucking argument that they are having is word for word taken from another Tumblr text post.
What I love about this fic is it is unapologetically how would you even describe it? Adorable doesn't feel right.
Genuine. I will
Genuine.
say it is nothing but genuine. Like the
Nothing
thing
but genuine.
with these kind of amateur fics by people who haven't written before, people who don't write much out of like very short tropey fan fiction,
Yeah.
is that there is an utter love of doing it because there's no money in this. Like it's not even an ego thing for them. It is pure spur of the cuff. I'm having fun with this creativity. And even if, you don't buy the actual work, you're not really emotionally invested with it. It is so fun to engage with that kind of genuine enthusiasm in art, especially nowadays. That's always just a breath of fresh air to read these kind of things.
I think if I had to guess, out of the three of the fics that we have presented here, this is the most like what I expect your average person who doesn't read fan fiction thinks what fan fiction is.
Yeah, because it's kind of clunky. The characterizations are a little off. It's very, very short and stilted at times. Like it is, and I say this with the like highest praise possible, kind of amateurly written, and that's a good thing for it.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something earlier that I found compelling, which was that there's no money in fanfic. Well, there's no money in podcasting either. Until you get sponsors. We'll be back after these messages.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good, though.
This was pretty good. Do you want to do a staged please don't listen to the Magnus protocol?
Absolutely, I want to do a stage. Please don't listen to the Magnus protocol with you. I cannot imagine anything I want to do more.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an official message from Archive of My Own, hosted by Patty, special guest Dave. And we wanted to come here today to let you know about a movement we've been behind, which is don't listen to the Magnus Protocol, the sequel to the Magnus Archives. It's not very good.
Don't do it.
It's not pretty.
You're better than that.
It's kind of boring.
It's really boring. I don't care about the characters. They keep trying to ask me to learn 18 new names, and none of them are Michael. And it's a travesty. It's a travesty.
And honestly, like, I tried listening to it, and they said that it wasn't going to be a sequel. They said it was its own thing, and they immediately started hinting about how it was just a sequel to the Magnus Archives. And I thought that was kind of boring. Instead, this has been a hidden covert ad for a much superior podcast. If you enjoy yearly existential dread, if you enjoy the oncoming horror and knowing terror that one day your time on this earth will end, I cannot recommend to you highly enough Till Death Do Us Blart, a review podcast where 5 idiots watch Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 every year on American Thanksgiving. Check it out.
It's pretty good.
And we're back. So, our third and final fic that we're going to talk about today is Beholding the GDPR. How the Magnus Institute updated its privacy policy for the 21st century and only caused one nervous breakdown in the process, by Shiny Opals. Now, this one was a doozy. I don't think I have ever read a fanfic of this style.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more interesting ones. I gave this one to you because it makes use of something called a work skin, which is a real fun feature that AO3 has where it lets you with the HTML.
The work skin on this one is insanely well detailed. I love how everyone has all the attachments that we never actually get to see, like the PDFs, the photos, it's all so funny.
hmm Especially because I'm almost certain that this one was like coded for this fic. It's not one of the standard preset ones, and they did a really great job on it.
Oh, absolutely. And that makes it so beautiful. I particularly so this one I think has the best arc out of all three, which is
Mhm.
the completely made up character for this fic, Christopher Davies, who
I love him.
is so well realized that you and I, who have both listened to the Magnus archives like twice, had to look it up just to make sure he wasn't a real character because we couldn't remember his name, but he sounded like he belonged to the cast.
He felt like such a real dude. I feel like I remember hearing about him in like the IT department in like one of the offhand season 1 comments.
Yeah.
I but no, it is really rare for fanfic to kind of one put a whole new character into a work, and two, have it not suck real bad. And this doesn't suck real bad. The character is there just enough to facilitate what is really funny and the good character dynamics and kind of the fun back and forth, and has a bit of a small arc and then quits
Yeah.
his job.
Quits
And
his
good for
job.
him.
I mean, and if you've listened to the Magnus archives, you know that that's no small feat.
No, good for him.
Good for him. What I love about this is all of the jokes around basically just giving the characters like in character office things to do, like because the Magnus Archives is technically set in an office. These like they're supposed to be doing their job around it, and yet they never really do, which is so funny. Be in this one because there's so much humor you can mine out of the fact that this is how this character would answer emails and this is how this character would respond to a text, and it something that I usually find maybe not so interesting is like assigning so many random quirks to characters when they're not really supported in like canon, but in this one it's just insanely charming.
Because almost all of the quirks are they are less fandom derived quirks and tend to be more tropes from kind of general office humor or office culture that is then added to these characters. Like Elias, his email has a tagline about like, think of the environment before you print this out, which is not supported at all by canon, but is the exact kind of thing your annoying, terrible, evil boss would have as an email signature.
I do love that very much. It's one of the
It's
funniest.
really good. It's really good. And the author really really understands how these different characters would text. A lot of times in like fics where it's emails or texts or something, the characters will write exactly like they talk, which isn't really,
And that's not.
yeah, no, it's not. There's a huge
Yeah,
difference.
no.
And they nail this here. Characters who, whether they use punctuation, capitalization, their styles, their word choices, all of it feels right, And it's not just a transcription of the podcast. You thinking about the email printing thing?
I'm thinking about the email printing thing. Do you have a favorite email in the series?
Absolutely. It's Daisy's one email, the only email we get from Daisy at all, which merely says a single word: unsubscribe.
Unsubscribe.
Not that she has taken an action, merely the open-faced request to the entire work email chain that she not be included.
She doesn't want to be included.
Because I've wanted to send that email so many times, it's unreal. And God, good for her.
My favorite is it's technically a cheat because this one happens more than once, but it's the monthly roundups.
Those are delightful.
Where Elias, who, again, spoilers, which you should have listened to at the beginning of the episode, ends up being the main villain of the series. He has to send monthly updates about every department in this beta office. And half of them are like, a busy month for research. Jean celebrated her birthday. Laura announced a pregnancy. And then when they get to like the archives, they're like, if anyone has any information on the whereabouts of John, the archives team would appreciate it if you let them know. Like,
It's so good because again, it's one of those things where it's always funny to imagine some kind of diabolical supervillain like doing like managerial work,
yeah.
like clocking in at his 9 to 5, doing
Clocking in his
payroll.
9 to 5. My favorite one is by the time you read this fan fiction, you've almost certainly listened to the Magnus archives all the way through.
One would hope.
One would hope. And there's this bit where in one of the monthly reviews, he goes, "Archives, welcome back, John, who's had an eventful couple of months." And that's one way to describe the series.
Yeah. Because I think based on the timeline, that would be the period with the unknowing. So he got kidnapped 3 times, went to America, went to China, ran into some clowns, blew up, was in a coma. Yeah. Eventful few months.
Eventful few months.
Yeah. One could argue he had the most eventful few months, to be honest.
Almost certainly. All right. Well, we're wrapping up here at Archive of My Own. It's my archive now.
It's yours now.
It's mine now. I wanted to say thank you for coming on the podcast and helping me record for a second time in a row.
Hey, no worries. I do have to ask, though, when I talk about the podcast, do I have to refer to it as Archive of Your Own to indicate that it's yours?
I don't know yet. We're going to figure that out with legal afterwards.
Yeah.
Any fanfics we didn't cover that you'd like to plug? Maybe not for the Magnus archives, but just in general.
You've opened up a dark Pandora's box right now. I would like to suggest the ever fantastic and classic. I think everyone should go look that one up, no context, and start reading. Bye.
Dave's recommendation for a fan fiction has been removed from the audio recording of this podcast for obscene material and excessive amounts of sexual content. You'll just have to imagine what it was about.
I can't have this ever get linked back to my actual AO3 page.
Thank you so much for listening to Archive of My Own, a fanfiction review podcast. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a review on our SoundCloud. As always, a special thank you to Patricia Taxon for her music, especially from her album Nexus Pelican. Our theme song is Who's Driving This Thing? And you can find that album and the rest of her music on our Bandcamp, patriciataxon.bandcamp.com. As well, I'd like to thank Dave for joining me this week for our Magnus Archives episode, and to the writers of the Fanfics Reviewed, Driflew, Blue Jays Blue Skies, and Shiny Opals. Please never stop writing. Thank you to the folks over at Rusty Quill for making a great podcast, and check out the Magnus Archives on a podcatcher of your choice. Next week, we're delving back into the DC Universe with special guest Matt Reeves, director of The Batman. We'll be discussing the future of the franchise as well as... Is that right? Reviewing my fan fiction? Well, you gotta check that out. Alright, listeners, this is Patrick signing off of Archive of My Own. Have a wonderful week, and always keep reading. Good night.
which is a real fun feature that AO3 has, where it lets you screw.
Dude,
with the
I'm gonna have to
HTML.
censor these anyway. I don't know why you're even trying. I had to go out of my way, and I found the audio recording of Elias hitting Peter Lucas with the crowbar to death, or a metal pipe to death. And I
not Peter Lucas, but Jurgen Leitner.
No, it wasn't
I'm not
Peter
gonna be
Lucas.
okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, now I'm definitely
It was
cutting
Jurgen
this.
Leitner.
I'm definitely cutting this.
Yeah, you could let them know that you're a fake Magnus fan. Oh, okay. Anyway, you found the audio of the pipe.
I found the audio of the pipe, and I'm using it to censor all the time you swear on this podcast. Anyway,